Hello and welcome to another episode of the Kid Stories Podcast. I'm Phil Bechtel. Let's get into a shout-out. Jack Kramer from Bothell, Washington left me a message on SpeakPipe. Happy birthday, Jack. I hope you had a great party. I hope for your birthday you got a magical pair of pants whose pockets are always full of candy, and a magical sword that shoots flames, and a sidekick capybara named Pete who's got superpowers, and a big bucket of goofballs. Jack, I think if you were a character from the stories, you'd be a laser puppy trainer, commanding an army of adorable dogs whose eyes shoot healing beams, and whose wagging tails can open portals. Thanks for listening, Jack. Today's episode is the fourth in the Magic Fix series titled Embers Flame. Nora sat on the edge of the inn's narrow bed, methodically checking her crossbow for the third time that hour. Each bolt was straight, each mechanism working smoothly.
"You've already checked that,"
Pip observed from across the room where she was carefully organizing small glass vials in her satchel. Her voice was steady, but she had been double-checking the same potions for the past 20 minutes. "I know," Nora replied, not looking up. "But if something goes wrong, I want to be absolutely sure everything works." Finn was hunched over the small table by the window, studying a hand-drawn map of Millhaven's surrounding area that he had purchased from a local merchant earlier that day. He had marked every road, every landmark, and every possible escape route and hiding place in case they needed to retreat back through town. "According to this," he said, tapping the map with his finger, "there are 3 main roads leading out of town, plus 2 smaller trails that might work if we need to get away quickly. The problem is we don't know which direction this storage facility is in." Pip held up a small vial filled with what looked like sparkling sand.
"I've got the chaos powder ready, but remember, once I use this, we'll have maybe 10 minutes of confusion before everything settles down. We need to make those minutes count."
"We'll need to stay close together and move fast," Finn said, looking up from his map. Nora nodded, then stood and began pacing the room's length. "Let's go over the plan one more time. We go to the meeting, we act interested in their business opportunity, and we try to learn as much as possible about where they're keeping the dragon eggs."
"And if they get suspicious?"
Pip asked. "We stay calm. We stick to our story about being from Magic Fix," Nora said. "We tell them that we didn't bring any money to the meeting. We didn't want to bring that much money until we were sure they had what we wanted. We tell them that we'll meet another time with the money to make the purchase." "But if we can't avoid a fight?" Finn pressed. Nora touched the crossbow at her side. "Then we use everything we've got and we run. The important thing is that at least one of us gets back to the Dragon Highlands to report what we've learned." The room fell quiet as the weight of what they were going to attempt settled over them. Outside their window, the sounds of the marketplace were beginning to fade as merchants closed their stalls for the evening.
"You know,"
Pip said quietly,
6 months ago, the most dangerous thing we dealt with was an overcharged cleaning crystal that might have singed someone's eyebrows."
"I was just thinking the same thing," Finn admitted. "Now we're planning to infiltrate a criminal operation to rescue some dragon eggs." Nora paused in her pacing. "Do you think we're in over our heads?"
"Definitely,"
Pip replied immediately. "Absolutely," Finn agreed. "But we're doing it anyway?" Nora asked.
"For Ember,"
Pip said firmly. "For Ember," Finn echoed. Nora nodded. "Then let's get this over with." As the light faded from the sky, they made their final preparations. Finn tucked the map into his shirt and double-checked that his adventure pack had everything they might need for a quick escape. Pip secured her potions and made sure the chaos powder was easily accessible. Nora strapped on her tool belt and loaded her crossbow, keeping it concealed under her cloak.
"Here,"
said Pip, handing each one a vial of smoke potion. "Ready?" Nora asked.
"No,"
Pip replied,
"but let's go anyway."
They left the inn and made their way through Millhaven's winding streets toward Matthias's stall, where their escort would be waiting. The market district looked different in the evening light. Shadows seemed deeper, sounds more muffled, and the cheerful bustle of daytime commerce had been replaced by something more secretive and cautious. As they approached the red and gold banner that marked Matthias's booth, Nora could see two figures waiting in the shadows nearby. One was Matthias himself, recognizable even in the dim light. The other was a stranger, a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a dark traveling cloak.
"Right on time,"
Matthias said as they approached.
"I like punctuality in business partners."
The stranger stepped forward, and in the lamplight they could see he had the weathered face of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. His eyes were sharp and calculating as they took in each of the three kids.
"These are the young entrepreneurs I told you about,"
Matthias said to the stranger.
"Very promising. Very motivated."
"We'll see,"
the stranger replied in a gravelly voice.
"I'm Brutus. I'll be escorting you to meet my associates. Are you ready to go?"
"We're ready," Nora said, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Brutus nodded once.
"Good. Follow me and stay close."
Brutus led them away from the market district, down increasingly narrow side streets that Finn didn't recognize from his map. The man moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew every shadow and shortcut in the area, and within minutes they had left the familiar bustle of Millhaven behind.
"Where exactly are we going?"
Pip asked as they passed the last of the town's outer buildings.
"Not far,"
Brutus replied without turning around.
"My associates prefer privacy for their operations. You understand."
The path he led them down was little more than a dirt track that wound through scraggly farmland and patches of scrub forest. The moon was only a thin crescent, providing barely enough light to avoid stumbling over roots and rocks. After about 20 minutes of walking, they crested a small hill and could see their destination ahead. A cluster of old farm buildings, silhouetted against the night sky. Even from a distance, it was clear the place had been abandoned for years. The main farmhouse was missing half its roof, and the barn looked ready to collapse. "Charming location," Finn muttered under his breath.
"It serves our purposes,"
Brutus said, apparently having overheard.
"Remote, private, and completely forgotten by the local authorities."
As they approached the buildings, Nora could see warm light flickering from what looked like an underground entrance beside the collapsed barn. Stone steps led down into what must have been a root cellar or storage area that had been expanded into something much larger.
"The real operation is below,"
Brutus explained, noticing their curious looks.
"Much better for maintaining the proper temperature and magical environment for delicate merchandise."
Two more men emerged from the shadows as they approached the entrance. Both were armed with swords and had the alert, watchful posture of experienced guards.
"These are the kids Matthias told us about?"
one of the guards asked Brutus.
"That's right. Come to see our operation firsthand."
The guard studied them for a moment, then stepped aside.
"Boss is waiting downstairs. Says to bring him straight down."
Brutus gestured toward the stone steps.
"After you, young entrepreneurs."
The underground facility was far more extensive than any of them had imagined. What had started as a simple root cellar had been expanded into a network of connected chambers, carved directly from the earth. Magical torches provided steady light, and the air hummed with carefully maintained enchantments.
"Impressive, isn't it?"
Brutus said, noting their wide-eyed expressions.
"Took nearly 2 years to excavate and enchant properly."
The first chamber they entered was clearly a workshop area. Tables lined the walls, covered with tools and equipment.
"This is where we process the shells,"
Brutus explained casually.
"After the dragons hatch, of course. The grinding and purification process requires very precise temperature control."
Pip tried to keep her voice steady.
How many shells do you process in a typical month?
Depends on the season, Brutus replied. Dragon mating cycles are seasonal, you understand. Spring and early summer are busiest times.
They moved through a second chamber that seemed to serve as living quarters for the operation's workers. Simple cots lined one wall, and the smell of cooking food suggested this was a permanent base rather than a temporary setup. How many people work here? Finn asked, trying to sound professionally curious rather than like he was gathering intelligence.
Enough, Brutus said shortly. My associates prefer to keep staffing information confidential.
But as they walked, Nora counted at least 8 different people moving around the facility, and she suspected there were more in areas they weren't being shown. Finally, Brutus led them to the largest chamber, and what they saw there made Pip gasp audibly before she could stop herself. Along one entire wall, arranged on specially designed shelves, were dozens of dragon eggs. The eggs varied in size and color. Some were deep red like ember. Others were green, blue, silver. Each egg sat in its own specially designed cradle that glowed softly with heating enchantments. "Magnificent, aren't they?" said a new voice from the shadows. A woman stepped into the light. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with the confidence of someone in charge. This had to be the boss the guard had mentioned. "I'm Elena," she said, approaching them with a businesslike smile. "Welcome to our operation. I understand you're interested in becoming distributors." Nora forced herself to focus on the woman instead of staring at the stolen eggs. "We're impressed. This is much larger than we expected." "We take pride in our professionalism," Elena replied. "Quality control, proper storage conditions, reliable supply chains. All the things that separate us from the amateurs." "Where do you get so many eggs?" Pip asked, her voice slightly strained. Elena's smile grew sharper. "We have very dedicated procurement specialists. They know exactly when and where to find the freshest specimens." Finn was trying to process what he was seeing. There had to be at least 40 eggs on the shelves, maybe more. There were way more eggs here than were taken from the Highlands. They must be stealing from all over, from places the kids probably didn't even know about. "How much would someone pay for a whole egg?" Nora asked. "Hypothetically." "Depends on the breed and size," Elena replied. "For a common variety, perhaps 200 gold pieces. For rarer breeds—" She gestured toward a shelf holding several particularly large, iridescent eggs. "Well, those can fetch 1,000 gold or more." Those numbers were staggering. Just the eggs visible in this one chamber represented more wealth than most people would see in a lifetime. "Of course," Elena continued, "the real profit comes from controlling the hatching process. A dragon that imprints on you at birth is worth far more than any amount of gold." "You keep some for yourselves?" Finn asked. "Naturally. Our operation has grown large enough that we need additional security measures." As if summoned by her words, they heard a low rumble from somewhere deeper in the facility. It was definitely a dragon's growl, but unlike anything they'd heard from Ember or the wild dragons. "Don't mind Rex," Elena said casually. "He's one of our first successful acquisitions. Very loyal. Very protective of our interests." The implications hit all 3 of them at once. These people hadn't just stolen eggs. They'd been doing it long enough to raise adult dragons as guards and enforcers. "Would you like to see more of the facility?" Elena asked. "We have incubation chambers, even a laboratory where we experiment with different hatching conditions and egg powder potions." "That would be educational," Nora managed to say. But as Elena began leading them toward another chamber, Nora caught Pip's eye and saw her own realization reflected there. They had found the stolen eggs, but they had also discovered something much worse than they'd imagined. This wasn't just a theft operation, it was a full-scale dragon trafficking enterprise that had been running for years. And now they were standing in the middle of it, surrounded by criminals and at least one enslaved dragon with no clear way to escape. Completely in over their heads. The end. Thanks for listening, friends. The website is kidstoriespodcast.com. Send all your drawings and things to kidstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Adios.